Hello and welcome to Food for You and the Planet, a fresh new podcast that explores healthy and environmentally sustainable food solutions. This podcast is brought to you by Healthy Planet Online Farmers Market. I'm Dr. Rosemary Ostfeld and I'm your host. Together, we'll hear from leaders in environmental science, agriculture, medicine, nutrition, entrepreneurship, and more. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to hear all the latest in healthy and sustainable food with Food for You and the Planet. Today's episode features Dr. Teresa Leslie, Director of the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. Teresa holds a doctorate in medical anthropology from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a master's degree in medical anthropology from the University of South Carolina, and a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Howard University. She has experience cultivating relationships with diverse stakeholder groups to create innovative, evidence-based policy and practice solutions. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
So can you tell me a little bit about what Northeast SARE is and the type of work that you guys do?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Northeast SARE is actually part of a larger program, which is SARE. And the program is funded by NIFA, USDA, and it's in 4 regions, Southern, Western, North Central, and then Northeast, which, oh, I should have looked this up, but it's about 12 states and including Washington, D.C. Please don't ask me to list the states because I always forget one and then people may become offended. And what we do, there are a couple of things that we do. Our primary work is grant making. So when we get the money through NIFA, it goes through a university. And so we are housed, Northeast SARE is housed at University of Vermont. And then what we do, in addition to using that money to run our administration, we re-grant the money through 6 different grant programs. So our grant programs include research and education, novel approaches, and PDP, which is professional development. Those are our large grants, and we have a new grant that just launched this year. It's closed now, and actually the proposals are under review, which is a historically underserved farmer grant. So that's 4. And then we have our smaller grants, which is the farmer grant, partnership grant, and graduate student grant. And again, they're smaller, but most of our work and most of what we fund deals with improving and not advocating, but looking at methods that help with sustainable agriculture. And what I didn't mention is that SARE also has a national office, which is a communications office. So the research that SARE does across the country at all the different SAREs goes back and they provide publications, books, pamphlets, which is the education component of Northeast SARE. So on top of that, we also have each region has something called a professional development program. And this is where we have state coordinators at all the land grants, 1862 and 1890. And they also provide professional development to farmers. So we are in every state. We not only provide funding for research and the type of funding that you're looking, like if you want funding, you go to our website and look at the number of grants that we have and see if it fits, but also providing that education piece, which is equally important.
How did you become interested in sustainable food and agriculture?
Oh, that's a very good question. I lived abroad for 8 years. And originally, I was doing a lot of infectious disease research as a social scientist. Um, and I lived in the Caribbean for 8 years. And what I noticed is, especially in that environment, it was a very small island, was the price of food and the lack of local production. So when I was there, I kind of got involved with um, working with the different ministries because it's a small island that is under Dutch control still, And it is, so we have to deal with the ministries in the Netherlands, and really talking to them about improving growing food locally and the significance of local food to health. So when I left the island, I kind of came back with the intent to go into this field with this expertise in the United States. And I guess, one of the things if you really want to do something, you really just have to work towards it. And then this position came up and I applied, and it's been wonderful. We have a great staff. So, again, if you're interested in applying for a grant, get in contact with us. And the people on our staff would be happy to talk to you and to find out which program fits, if it does.
Now, you talked a little bit about the grants that you guys offer and professional development, but what are some of the key topic areas Northeast SARE is focused on, like specifically?
Yeah, well, the thing about Northeast SARE, and all the SAREs, we are legislated by Congress. So that's something that's important to understand to fund certain types of research. And most of our research are looking for sustainable ways to improve production. And that's a very important distinction to be made. Now, our research and education program is different from our novel approaches. Novel approaches is like kind of more experimental, looking at things that might be good, as opposed to research and development is like more implementation, kind of showing people some sustainable ways of doing agriculture. But our underserved farmer grant is kind of a little different in that it goes away from that kind of production area and is more looking at the development of the agricultural industry and agricultural workers, as well as the health of farmers and their overall health and well-being, and the communities that they serve. So, and I think that, what's really unique about Northeast SARE is we have something called an administrative council. And the administrative council is now 23 individuals who sit on, you could say it's like a board, and they are very visionary. And certain seats are legislated. So in our legislation, we have to have somebody from the EPA. We have to have somebody from, the NIFA person has to be sitting there. But each region of SARE can kind of develop seats. So we have been very intentional in looking for farmers, getting farmers there, people from extension, and that's something else that's legislated. We have to have people from extension. But we also now have an indigenous foodways seat. We also now have one of our deans and directors is representing urban agriculture. We also have a new AC member coming in that's representing migrant workers. So to a certain extent, it becomes very bottom up, and what is considered important comes from those people who are actually working in agriculture. And the AC meets, really, they're the ones that make the final decisions on what's funded. And again, they're very visionary, and each region of SARE has its own administrative council. So while we're legislated, there's a lot of flexibility. And I think that whoever created this was really ahead of their time, because a lot of farmers really refer to Northeast SARE for the research that is actually produced. So,
What are some examples of some impactful research that's been funded by Northeast SARE, and have there been any interesting findings?
a lot of times when you are funding things, you tend to begin to fund what's safe, what you know. And at Northeast SARE, and I think the other SARE regions, we're trying to find ways to fund things that are a little bit different and a little bit more risky. So, for example, urban agriculture, which is something that I hold very close to my heart, I would say, that's not something we typically fund or we have typically funded. And a lot of times when you hear like reviewers or look at reviewers' comments, they're not sure about what's innovative about that. But I think that a lot of the research that's going on that we are funding in urban agriculture is kind of testing to see what are the conditions that allow for the best production. And in urban agriculture, there's that whole community piece. And that's something else that I'm very interested in. As an anthropologist, you can imagine. I'm more of a people person, as opposed more interested in the farmers and the people they serve and how agriculture can support communities. So for me personally, that's just a personal thing. Somebody else can look at what we funded and say, well, that's not of interest to me. I like this. But some of the most incredible projects are those projects that not only increase production, but have an impact on the communities that they serve.
Yeah, I think that's definitely really important how it's impacting the communities, the local economy. What
Yes.
are some ways that you think agriculture can support communities? It sounds like that's a topic that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I am passionate about that because I think that's what really, in visiting a lot of farms, both in really, they say there's no such thing as suburban anymore. It's just rural. I don't know. I make the distinction, but and a lot some because I also am conducting research and beginning to start with some of this research, and I've been interviewing farmers as well as participants on farms, like people who participate in farming activities. And what we find is um, for those people who visit farms, it provides almost like an oasis, a place where they can relax. And a lot of farmers are um, aware of that and doing other types of therapies, especially among children in some areas. Plus, it provides, I mean, if but at the same time, you don't want a farm to just do that. They also have to do some form of production, right? Because if you're now trying to alleviate, let's say, food insecurity in particular areas, you can have as many social programs as you want. But I think that the business side of it says that you should be trying to, produce so that your farm is sustainable. A lot about sustainability is about being able to run your day-to-day operations and pay the people that work for you. But just think about that. If you create these local and regional foodways, these local and regional connections, making food something again more local and regional so that we know where our food comes from. And there's such a passion. I mean, for somebody to say that they're a farmer, there's such a passion with that person and their connection to the community. Um, it's amazing what I'm seeing in some of the responses that I hear, both from farmers and from those people that visit the farms, or I would say are their customers. They get a lot of satisfaction, and it helps, I think, their mental health in coping. So again, that's not necessarily the primary thing that Northeast SARE does, but we are beginning to look at that and fund projects like that. But that is something that, in terms of research, I'm very interested in looking at.
Yeah, why is it important to build local and regional food systems? And what kind of role do you see SARE taking moving forward and like really supporting that
Well,
type?
one thing you have to remember is we are not an advocacy organization, but we can empower through funding other organizations to do that type of work. Um, food is so fundamental. I'm sure you know that. And unfortunately, in a lot of areas, you have places where there's no access to fresh, healthy foods. So the question becomes, we tend to look at agriculture when I talk to my environmental friends, for example, and I tell them that I'm interested in agriculture, they see it as something against environmental sustainability. When in reality, I think they're very parallel, especially sustainable agriculture, and developing it so that we begin to think of it not only as something that happens in rural areas, but something that happens across the United States, maybe on a smaller scale. But I think that, again, food that's closer to you is healthy. Well, I don't know if there's actually evidence that says that, to be honest with you. Um, but I think that there is some satisfaction in putting your hands in the dirt, planting and seeing something grow. And I think that fundamentally we've lost that connection between our food and where it comes from. So not only does local and regional food production can create jobs. I don't think people necessarily see that there is a definite economic benefit, not just for farmers, but people have to deliver foods. People have to, there are just so many components of it, and it could create a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurship. So again, this isn't something that's Northeast. In my personal research, perhaps I could advocate, but as SARE director, that's not something that we do. But I remember one time I was on the farm in a economically disadvantaged area in a city. I'm not going to say where. And I was sitting there under a tree, and I felt like I had escaped. I mean, it was just amazing. So if I'm feeling that, I'm sure other people can feel that. Um, and again, I think that there's just this disconnect. If you talk to some people and you're like, well, where does milk come from? The grocery store. The people have lost touch of the kind of the connections of where food comes from. So those both of I think that in terms of health, it's important, but I also think that in terms of the economic opportunities, there's a big there's something there. And I also think that agriculture is something that everybody can agree upon, as opposed to like talking about the environment and let's say carbon emissions. Talking about growing food for people to eat, I think it can unite. Um, I don't think we're there yet. Again, and that's more part of my personal philosophy than my job as Northeast SARE regional director is to make sure that our programming runs appropriately.
One challenge that a lot of farmers are now facing are challenges related to climate change. What
Yes.
do you think can be done to help farmers with some of these challenges?
Well, a lot of the research that we do, not we, but that some of the research we fund is directly related to climate change. Um, in Vermont, for example, we've had record flooding in the past 2 years, like to the date. Um, and we've had some discussions with some people in Vermont about what Northeast SARE can do. But again, in addition to funding, I think that is something that also goes to, let's say, the state coordinators and the education component. Um, and taking some of the research that we do, that people have done, and then applying it and having people like from extension, this is how it's set up to go out to these farmers and assist them. But I think that there's so much that needs to be done, and I think that what happened in Vermont and other places where you have this record, these floods that really have devastated farmers. And I think a lot of farmers are aware of it, especially, one thing that Northeast SARE does is fund a lot of small scale farming operations as opposed to big ag. Not that I'm not against big ag. I don't see myself as against anything, but I do think that a lot of what Northeast SARE does really does assist the smaller scale farmer who are trying to be. I got a call one day. Well, and it was from the Amish in Pennsylvania, and they just wanted access to our materials, our educational materials. So I went out of my way to get that to them because I really think that they would take this information and apply it. And it was amazing seeing talk about a farming community, to see what they're doing. And these were more organic dairy producers, small scale farmers. Um, and it's helping farmers like that and others that aren't the large scale operations.
Yeah, it sounds like you are helping all sorts of farmers in a lot of different ways. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Northeast SARE's grants, training opportunities, or other
Well,
resources
one
that
of the
can
things that I
help?
would like to mention is that we're really trying to increase our outreach. Um, because in talking, some people don't know what SARE is. Um, and I must say we have had some success. This is what kind of really attracted me to the position here. Um, Building relationships with farmers, um, letting them know, visiting farms. We're really trying to allow our staff to get out and visit farmers and really talk to them and explain our grant programs. We've also started a technical assistance program so that those operations, let's say, a nonprofit operation is not going to have the same capacity as an 1862 land grant university. So how do we allow, or how do we help people prepare applications so that they are competitive? We've also increased I wouldn't say increased, but tried to bring in regular people, meaning not people at universities, when I say regular people, to review grants. So having people from these nonprofits, having people from these more community-based organizations, having farmers review grants, I think really provides more opportunities. So we're really trying to again build relationships, talk to other organizations in the area, and let people know that Northeast SARE is here. Because what we've seen through our work, and this is the downside of it, is an increase in our applications. That's good, but the problem then becomes it becomes more competitive to actually, that's the problem. It's not really a problem, it's a challenge. But that's why we have the technical assistance so that so if you want to apply, and for some of our grant programs, we will be providing technical assistance in the future. It's really just was rolled out with our historically underserved farmer grant.
What are some of the greatest challenges and benefits related to achieving sustainable food and agriculture systems?
Wow. I would say that the lack of awareness of its importance, and that's an education piece. Again, going back to that example, when I talk to my environmental friends, they people just don't see agriculture as sustainable. They see it as something that has a negative impact on the environment, and it doesn't have to. Um, and again, I'm not saying it's one or the other, but the more research we do, the more education we provide, the more we get the word out there. I think, one step at a time. Um, it's probably one of the most important things because I've seen it not only here, but I've seen it in internationally. And that gives me a kind of different, not different, but expanded view of it. Um, if food is not close to you, food is just going to get more expensive. And it's all, it used to be a time when you went to the farmer's market and oh my goodness, it's so expensive at the farmer's market. It's not more expensive now, it's about the same or less. So, I mean, look where we have come. Um, And again, one thing that's great about Northeast SARE in general, is that all the research, it's like a loop. We do the research and then we create educational materials. So it's always the latest information. And there's some classics about building your soil, cover crops, all types of sustainable practices. And it's all on the SARE website to look at those, what publications are there. And a lot of our pamphlets are free. So you don't even have to, books maybe not, but they're really minimal at a minimal cost. And I think that if you represent a nonprofit, there's a way to get them. So I would definitely direct people to go and look at some of the publications and educational materials that are offered, because I am one of those people that believes that, education is really the key. So, and it's great to be in a position where you're funding things and providing the education.
What do you think is the future of sustainable agriculture?
I can tell you what I hope it is. I
That
don't
sounds
know.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I would like to see is more people, not necessarily farming, I would say, but planting. Let's put it that way. There's a difference between, I'm not a farmer, but I do enjoy having my garden. Um, and just, I mean, it's like a dream if you think about more of a green cities and green environments where um, food is more accessible and available. Um, and if I have like tomatoes, maybe you have peppers, and it's like a barter and an exchange. And I'm not saying again that we should do away with big ag. I think that everything has its place, but I would like to see more support and more awareness surrounding the importance of sustainable agriculture. And I don't think I mean, we just have to keep saying what we're saying and doing what we're doing, and hopefully the word will get out. But that's just more of a dream that I would like to see. More food growing locally, more information about nutrition, people understanding what's nutritious food. You know, a Cheeto is much more palatable than a carrot, and it's been designed like that. The refined foods that we eat, we know they're not good for us, but they sure taste good, and they've been designed like that. So again, it's like um, relearning what we eat. And I think that the way to talk about the first step in talking about what we eat is talking about sustainable agriculture.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add or share?
Look at Northeast SARE's website if you're looking for funding and you have a reason. And remember, we fund research. That's the research and education. And education. So if you're going or thinking about applying for a Northeast SARE grant, it does have to have a research focus. Even our farmer grants. But for our farmer grants, you get to link up with a technical person, a technical advisor, to advise you on that project, which usually is somebody or would like to see more partnerships between the farmers and extension. So yeah, go to our website and see all that SARE has to offer. It's a really great organization and a really great program.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast today, Teresa. It's really
Thank
nice.
you for having me.